someone. Like, yes, putting a kid in timeout, it teaches them a lesson on the spot that they can't do that on the spot.
It's costing them money. They don't. I mean,
but it's costing the wrong people money,
Right.
because the
Yeah.
people that are, you know,
that's not the way they look at it. You know,
Right.
money. Them head guys that are making all this money you're greedy.
well, and like if you look at like the three things that are identified as being problematic with America's prison, you know, and our approach to punishment is that it lacks public safety rationale, appropriately affects minorities and the poor, and it inflicts overly harsh sentences. So, like, yeah, money. How many times do you think they get that room and board back? How many people actually pay that?
I've never paid mine.
No, I mean, I've always got the bill.
And it's different than costs and fines. They won't put you back in for it, but they will report it to the credit bureau.
Right.
Do they really?
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
I know in Northampton County, so they give you a bill when you leave, right? And then when you come back in, they charge you more for room and board the second time, third time, whatever. It keeps going up. But, like, so if somebody comes and puts money on your books for commissary, they take half of it right off the rip. Now, I know, like, in Lehigh County Jail, they just have a flat processing fee, and that's that. They charge you $60, and you can't do or buy anything until you pay that $60, and that's that.
I think that's kind of like retarded. They're going to charge you you're in jail for so long, and they give you a bill when you're on your way out, and you don't have no job. You're probably homeless at this point.
Right. And then
So-
you go
and
and
they
you meet with your
expect
probation officer for the first time, and you get your cost and fines total, which you heard when you were in
And
jail.
you can't get off
when you're in court,
until
but
it's
you
all
don't
paid.
remember it. Absolutely. And then, you know, some of the guys that I worked with had my mortgage is less than what they owed in cost and fines, which is ridiculous. And that's separate from, you know, the arrears that they owe for child support, which they'll put you right back in for that. Like, you can't.
Well, I think some of that room and board stuff was kind of like they started doing that with the work release programs, you know, where you got to pay so much a week to be there because you're working and you're living there and you're eating there. And I think they tried to, like, transition that into, like, the county jails, like regular where inmates go, to try and help alleviate some of the cost to the taxpayer. But like you said, nobody hardly ever pays it, so it really didn't do anything other than generate more bad credit for people that already had shitty credit to begin with.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just kicking you when you're down, basically. And
Exactly.
like in Pennsylvania, we already have a $2.5 billion budget for Department of Corrections. So why do we need to suck out every nickel and dime from, you know, people who are starting their lives over again? They're coming out to nothing, usually going into a shelter or halfway house or something like that. I mean, yeah, it's
Pushes them to sell drugs or do whatever they were doing before.
yeah.
Right. They go back to
Why
what
not
they
go
know.
back to hustling?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They go back to doing what they know how to do best because nobody wants
And
to
you're
spend
you're
the
in
time
jail
on
and you got a record now and you're not going to get a job.
Because you got 6 felonies, right?
It's-
Retail
it's-
theft, you can't work in Walmart.
retail theft. You can't work at Amazon either.
Yeah.
Pretty much any kind
I've
of retail.
seen so many restrictions on jobs for different types of crimes that it's ridiculous. I can't wait until they're not allowed to ask you about those things anymore because
Remember when they ask, you only have to answer because legally they can only ask you if you've been convicted
right,
of a felony.
right. Oh, I know.
But they'll ask if you've been arrested, and you guys often give them too much information.
So what is that? I want to touch on that real quick. If you're convicted, that means that you were guilty
Right, you were
Yeah.
found
and you were
guilty.
sentenced.
You were
I can't
found
say
guilty.
that you were necessarily guilty because you were convicted, but that means that either a judge or a jury found you
So
guilty.
when they ask you that, you have to tell them.
If you've been convicted,
Yes.
there a lot. Well, you don't have to. I mean, you could lie on a job application,
But they're going to find out.
they're gonna find out.
Some of them do.
Yes.
I've been hired through companies that asked me, and they actually never ran a background check like they said they were going to. So I know not all companies do spend the time and money to actually do a background check. Most of your bigger corporations and anything that deals with like military or government contracts, they're definitely going to do that background check.
This isn't just a problem now either. So, like, this was a big problem during, like, the 1800s, around the Civil War era. The Civil War era, we had, like, this big boom in crime. So there was prisons everywhere. And there was a big boom in crime because there was a huge poverty rate. There was a
And
bunch
some PTSD.
and some PTSD because of the war. A whole bunch of
The
crazy
recession.
shit's going on.
Gee, I wonder if there's any correlation there.
A whole bunch of crazy shit's going on. Our country's in peril. There's things going on. The poverty rate's going up like crazy, and now the rich people are looking at these poor people and saying, "You're the problem." So they got all these prisons that are literally built just to put poor people in during the 1800s. That was
Debtors'
the whole,
prisons.
right? Debtors' prisons. There you go. So that's not just an issue that we have now. This is something that unfortunately we've been fighting for like 200 years.
It's crazy.
It is. It's insane to think that something can be a problem for 200 years.
They're the problem.
You know what though? That comes down to a lot of advocacy too. You know, and we've had this problem with addiction. You know, and people started advocating for it, and things started to change. Now, I'm not saying that there hasn't been advocacy over the years. I guarantee there has been, but sometimes people give up because they fight the good fight, and then they realize that they can't be beat, and then they stop. But it hasn't. So if people continue,
Absolutely, and it
Continue.
is still changing. And if you notice,
Right.
I always put on Facebook whenever they're doing when ACLU is having a probation reform open house or whatever. Like,
Right.
you guys should go to those things because you guys are like the perfect people to be advocates. You've been in those shoes. You've been in the system. You know how hard it is. And I think what's most messed up right now is if you look at, like, right now, give or take, there's like 462,000 people in Pennsylvania that are currently in local jails. And, of that, I think it says over 540,000 people are locked up who haven't even been convicted of or sentenced yet. So those are people who are in local jails. They're also in state prisons. They're locked up somewhere. They're in a hospital or whatever for mental health or whatever. Haven't even been convicted. So this country, you're going through all the history here. Isn't it? You're innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, supposedly.
it's
Supposedly.
backwards.
It's
Supposedly.
definitely ass
That's not
backwards.
accurate,
You're
is it?
definitely guilty until proven innocent. Because as soon
Absolutely.
as somebody says, "Oh, you're being charged with this," all eyes are on you, and everybody knows that that's what.
If that was the
like,
case,
now that's your label.
If that was the case, you'd be free.
That's true.
Right.
Say, hey, you killed this person. Hey, I'm innocent until proven guilty, so I should be let loose
Well,
Right.
and that's
until
so,
you prove that I'm guilty.
So then the idea for the original jails were like to hold people as well until they were holding people until they seek trial, especially for things like murder. Which, I mean, just in New Jersey a couple years ago, they changed their bail system around to where, like, if you're considered a flight risk, you're not getting bail. And if you're not a flight risk, they just let you go.
And who determines that?
It's your paperwork. So, like, I got arrested in New Jersey on, it was some BS. It was, my baby mom's was causing some issues, and I got caught up on a supposed, what's it called, going against the PFA order. I called my kids on Christmas. It was some craziness. We were going through some stuff. Everybody made bad decisions. It's cool. We're all good now.
Okay, good.
Everybody made bad decisions. We're all good now. That's all we got to say. Yeah, so going over there, they wouldn't let me out. Everybody else is getting out, but because I was a PFA violation from another state, they couldn't let me go. But I was watching it happen at that time. The law had just been passed. So, like, people were coming in on $1 million dope charges, and they're like, oh, well, you've never ran from us before, so we're going to let you go. And, like, I guess dude, like, ran to Puerto Rico. And, like, they still have that law in place, but, like, that's the risks that they take with not locking people up. Like, if they don't lock these people up until they go to court, there's a possibility that somebody could get hurt. I'm not saying every time, and it's
Right.
not right for every person. But there are some times when these people getting locked up is a good thing. You're saving somebody.
If they're guilty of what they're being charged with.
Right, if they're guilty. If they're guilty.
How many times do you know, I mean, and this probably has happened to both of you, I guarantee, where you've gone, you've gone to sentencing and they've said, well, this is what you're charged with. You didn't do it. But we're willing to drop this charge if you plead guilty to this. If not, and you think, well, I want to take it to trial, like any innocent person would want to do, right? That's probably what most people in the world would want to do. I didn't do it. I'm going to take it to trial. But little do they know that if you go and take it to trial and it's got a mandatory minimum, you know they're going to screw you because it's
like they do that and they tell you, or even your lawyers will tell you,
don't take it to trial.
Don't take it to trial because
you're going to lose.
You're going to lose, and they're going to rail you. And they say that shit to try to get people to not go to trial. Because honestly, I mean, especially in some of the bigger cases, or I'm sorry, not in the bigger case, but in the smaller cases that you're trying to beat and you want to go to trial for, the cost of the trial isn't worth the charge. You know what I'm saying? So like, if you're trying to fight a possession or a delivery charge, where you're only looking at like 2 years of probation or something like that, but you know you didn't do it, and you're trying to fight
you're going to plead out to it.
You're going to plead out because nobody wants to pay for it.
And
that's how they guarantee.
And that's the other thing
That's how
too.
they guarantee convictions.
And that's the other thing too, right? So like, you got to pay for all that. So like, not only does it cost the court system to run the trial, but you got to pay for a lawyer to defend you to do it.
If you don't have any money, you just like, I don't have any money to take this to trial, and I don't have any money for a lawyer, so
and then
I'm
you're
just
stuck with
say,
a public defender.
All right,
that's
I'm just going to plead guilty.
No, I have to say, see, the public defenders, they're overwhelmed.
right.
Their
and
caseloads are ridiculously high.
right, because nobody wants to do it. There's not enough of them.
Well, there's not enough of them. They don't get paid shit.
Exactly,
You know?
and that's why nobody wants to do it.
But they do. I know every public defender that I've worked with in Northampton and Lehigh County, every single one of them, they do put 100% into each case.
So
and
now,
I know you guys don't believe that.
Public pretender.
I did have a good public defender when I was in Northampton County.
I can actually back that. Like, I've had a couple of good ones and a couple that didn't know or didn't care what was going on. I had to tell one he was fired before. Like, I was like, I don't care what you have to say. Get out of here.
My first adult charge was a burglary charge, right? And I had a public defender, and I didn't even enter the structure, right? I got charged for breaking into a house that I'd never actually got into, and I had proof of it. There was proof that I never went into the actual house, but because I went on the porch, I technically entered the structure. And because of that, my public defender said, "Oh, well, you should just go ahead and plead out and take this 6 months, because if not, you're going to lose a trial."
And he's probably right.
But I never entered the house. There was definitely evidence.
But if there's evidence to show that you entered the structure by going onto the porch, and if the way the law
by a
is
technicality,
written,
but if I would have had a paid lawyer, they would have fought for that technicality.
No, that paid lawyer would have called in a favor to somebody to be like, why don't you just
Exactly.
ignore this fact right
Exactly.
here so that I can get him by here? Because that's what paid lawyers do. They use their presence to get you something. Like, they use their presence.
all these
they
wheels
come
and
in there.
deals happen
yes.
behind closed doors. You're not present. The judge isn't present.
Right.
It's just the DA and them.
and the lawyer.
So who knows? What do you think? I mean, I've been present for some of those conversations. Trust me.
I understand, and I understand money plays a big factor in a lot of these decisions.
Absolutely, it does.
You know what I'm saying? And that's
Money
that's
makes
my
the
point.
world go round, baby.
That's a whole
it's
nother
not-
subject that we can get into. But
So I think at this point,
All right, guys, that's going to conclude part one of our conversation about prison reform with Lori Collins. You catch us next time with the continuation of our discussion. Till then, remember, guys, that everybody has the ability to bounce back.